and welcome to this particular moment. Want to introduce Sarah Nahar to get us rolling. She, as you could have read from the flyer sent out, was a 2019 Rotary Peace Fellow, worked for the MLK Center in Atlanta. She is executive director in the past of Christian peacemaker teams, went to Spelman, MDiv from Anabaptist Mennonite Seminary in her hometown. And Sarah's the kind of person that doesn't leave anything she touches quite the same. So I'm going to be curious to see how she touches her subject matter today. I hope not too physically, but I wouldn't put it past her. But also, I first got to know Sarah as Sarah Thompson with a creative arts project called Carnaval de Resistance that was on summers, setting up carnival performances and doing community activism with a group of about 20 to 30 various places around the country. And she and I, as you've already heard, developed a pranking relationship. So Sarah, don't be surprised if midway through your presentation, suddenly the sound goes out or the video turns off, or certain kinds of excretory videos suddenly start playing. You just never know. But welcome. It's good to have you here. She's currently finishing up her PhD at Syracuse University and turning that place upside down. So we'll see what she does with us. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. And I want to give a shout out to SUNY ESF, which is the Environmental Science and Forestry School, which is right next to SU, where I'm actually weaving together 2 degrees, one in religion at SU and one in environmental studies at ESF. And so you'll see both of those streams kind of in the talk that we'll have today and the interaction, because for me, while the numbers, the scientific data, and the lived reality is very compelling already around climate, many people are not compelled by this, but it is rather a question of orientation, worldview, and meaning making, in which people are trying to hedge against the sense of loss and grief through denial or distancing or blaming and shaming of others, right? And so we come to this moment of climate crisis, which I start the climate clock with 1492, and I see colonization as a series of environmental injustices, crises, since that time. But right now, in an acute way, many, 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 many more people are feeling it and sensing it. And so as we think about ways of affecting change, which this group is committed to, I find it is almost as powerful to use story as it is to use statistics. So I'm grateful for this moment to talk with others who are committed and who are connected. I have my stack of books here, which I'll show you in a moment. Because yeah, I do think this is a serious academic topic, but it's also just really fun because everybody poops. Most people poop from their butt. Some people use a small colonoscopy bag, but like that's a really grounding place to start. However, it's kind of been taboo to talk about poop in a lot of places, not necessarily everywhere in our world, but most places. So I'm going to ask you to start by using the chat function. So if you go ahead and pull up your chat, it would really be interesting to me to know what your parents or your caregivers, what word you used, maybe they used when you were a child for the nutrients that comes out of your butt? What word did they use? Go ahead and type that in the chat. And we'll just have a, yeah, so we have a lot of poopy, poop, poop. Other ones, go ahead and type yours, even if it's the same or different. Grunts. Number 2, takla. In Kalamakan. Yes, bowel movements, the very proper. I was raised on bowel movement too. Poop and pee, poop, caca, shit, crap. Number 2, deuce. BM, yep. Excrement, very official. right, so true. Yeah, some people in Ohio, well, maybe not Ohio. Oh, sorry, Edgar. Yes, okay. We could work on that time. But there's I guess people outside Ohio, they sometimes call it taking the Browns to the Super Bowl. was one of them. So, yes. Okay, we're laughing, Edgar. Yes. Okay. I don't know you well enough, but yes. Yeah, I mean, if we want to get into this as well, and I invite you to yeah, dropping kids off at the pool. Yep. Yep. Grow a tail. Oh, it's a new one. I learn every time. Really? Making coffee. Oh my gosh. Oh, this is so helpful. Yeah. All it is always a question of what language I use when I do this work, like feces, excrement, urine. You like those are like very formal words. Poo can be like childish, and turns out like the word shit has noble roots. It often offends people, but it actually has like it comes from the Old English shindir, which like ends up meaning like to separate or to split. And science also has the same root. Again, this would be Western sciences that are coming at increasing levels of specialization and splitting things into different categories, right? There might be a paper in there sometimes, science is shit, but anyway, that's the first time I've said that out loud. But I really have to explain what I mean, right? In this climate of like anti-Western science, and at the same time having a chance to study with people at ESF who are looking at traditional ecological knowledge and the multiple sciences we have, how they're all connected around something as basic as our shit would be super interesting. And of course, people who were investigating at first, like, what is this stuff coming out of my body? When their first consciousness about it, we're doing science. Okay, maybe I'll write that paper sometime. It started here. Okay. But this question of how to talk about it is really important. Oh, that's a really actually helpful subtitle. Science is the shit. Is really key. And like shit ends up being one of the most neutral words. Sometimes I use crap, but that's kind of like Xerox, right? Like Thomas Crapper is the person who like invented one of the earliest water closets and manufactured it. And so by saying crap, like it's kind of like saying Kleenex instead of just tissue, or like Xerox instead of copy. So that's kind of interesting. So I'll use a range of terms. So I just invite you to bear with me, and as we kind of dive on in, so to speak, on these things. So yes, and we do have an autopilot assist here. So there's a couple of those. I really wonder what they will say about the notes to this meeting. All right. Since Jim spoke at first about the Carnival de Resistance, I would actually like to start my story there. I was invited there partially because of the work I was doing in social justice with community peacemaker teams, which is committed to building partnerships that transform violence and oppression in areas where lethal conflict exists and where the United States, and particularly our tax dollars, as well as military involvement, were like wreaking havoc. So in the case of CPT, these places during my time there were Palestine, Kurdistan, alongside First Nations folks in Turtle Island, as well as Colombia. with periodic delegations to the US-Mexico border and other places such as Suriname and places where we could offer periodic solidarity. So just sending a lot of love to those places today, as all of them continue to be in really intense times. And so what I began to notice through work and advocacy was that in each of these conflicts, it wasn't just about people, or it wasn't just about resources, but it was about the connections between people and their relatives and the environment where they lived and their human relatives. And the more and more I started to absorb the ecological dimensions of this, the more I wanted to learn about that. So in any case, when like CPT had some great policies that allowed us to have a little bit of time off, and so I would annually run away with the circus during these times off. This carnival was committed to ecological justice and looking at eco-theology. And so we were fossil fuel free. Overall, we had the event under a big tent and we lived in tents. We had a fossil fuel free kitchen and we had composting toilets. This was the first time I had really encountered a composting toilet. And I was disgusted. I was like, I will not be using this. No way. Okay, I'm down with the idea of the carnival, but this is too far. Just, But the issue is like, when you gotta go, you gotta go. So I eventually just had to use a bathroom. Yeah, and I could get away with free peeing elsewhere, but yeah. So after a couple weeks of this residency, sure, I was getting a little more used to it, but I was like, oh, this can't be the future. At the end of the residency in Harrisonburg, Virginia, we had an opportunity to actually cart our human manure in these like sealed 5-gallon buckets. And we took it to a place called the New Community Project that was processing it properly. They showed us how the human manure composting works. They showed us how it could go on flower beds and apple orchards. They taught us about other potentials that it could have, but they were within city limits. And so that certainly curtailed what they were able to do. However, that was so moving for me. Like, I had what I experienced as like a teshuva moment, a turning around, a metanoia, a conversion. Like I realized, oh my goodness, this is incredible. What comes out of me can nourish, can be supportive to life. What I considered waste, what? And so like that began my commitments to figuring out, okay, so new life goal, I don't want to shit in fresh water again. So beginning to follow this thread, I started to see the apparatus of freshwater flush all around me and unable to support or sustain alternatives at scale. And started to see the hegemony, right? That's the way that the cultural aspects come into reinforcing certain ideas to the point where you don't even know that something that is not normal has been normalized. I began to do research. Started by reading Jamie Benedictson, The Culture of Flushing. I can definitely get you a whole book list afterwards because comprehensive exams will do that to you. Book list, right? And comparing my experience to Kathleen Meyer's work, How to Shit in the Woods. She starts this book by saying, how to shit in the woods is a lost art. You can't just run out there and pull your pants down. You got to know where you are, how far from water you are, how you can dig, right? And then so she goes back to a piece in Deuteronomy 23 in the Hebrew scriptures that talks about the importance of going outside the camp and taking your spade with you. And that verse ends up having other implications around how we understand the holy, because it says, because God doesn't want to like basically step in your crap when God is moving through the camp to give you victory, yada yada. It's a very interesting verse, and if anyone wants to nerd out on that, we can definitely go there. But from there we start to see, and all the way through many different societies, the development of codes about cleanliness, and how that gets transmuted into purity, and how that relates to holiness. So I started to trace this stuff. I was in any case, my time with CPT was coming to an end, but just a recognition that as I reflected on that, I had never quite really asked some of the questions around wellness and sanitation as it related to issues of lethal conflict, of displacement. But of course, it is there as well, in addition to fecal-borne fecal pathogens that can be transmitted, cholera, giardia, other things of that nature. There is a real sense of relief or not relief that people get when they're able to kind of poop and pee in peace, or if that's anxiety ridden, not safe, challenging for any reason. So there's just like, so looking at what's happening on the level of excreta is actually a lens through which I realized I can look at almost any other thing that's going on and learn something new about it, and hopefully contribute to a dimension that has been taboo and off limits. And these taboos are relatively new. And again, they're not in every culture. They're not in every family culture. They're not in every ethnic culture, something like that. But just as we could not address the HIV/AIDS crisis without a frank conversation about sex, which was also often quite taboo, we can't actually address our sanitation crisis worldwide without a discussion of shit. So this text, called The Last Taboo, also it has a subtitle of Opening the Door on the Global Sanitation Crisis. And when I was having my own experience at the carnival, I didn't realize there was a global sanitation crisis. 3.5 billion, the number's up to 3.5 billion now. People don't have a proper place to go to the bathroom. This is like no porta potty, no box, no like place to even safely dig a hole. And so this leads to tremendous impact on the environment. And we know that environment is directly connected to health. And so it's like 70 children every 2 hours. It just like have died from dysentery because of the ways in which, again, urine is basically sterile. It has nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, and we can talk about those agricultural properties in a bit. But urine is basically sterile, but poop definitely carries pathogens. Moving away from freshwater flush systems does not mean just like open defecation or pooping wherever. We're smart enough as a collective to figure out like more healthful ways to deal with our crap. And what is happening right now is that even in some places where there's some limited freshwater flush systems, either the sewering is not completely connected, or the non-sewered systems don't exist. And we just have like, there's just like poop everywhere is what it feels like. Maybe groups tend to have an area where they poop, but it still gets tracked in. And you know, flies, y'all, like flies fly around, they land on poop, then they go land on food. And so what happens then is like, this causes a diarrhea because the organs of the body, the intestines, then try to push through this bacteria. And in doing so, they're blocking also the uptake of the nutrients that the children need to survive. And I'm focusing on children because of the underdeveloped immune systems. And that is mostly who is impacted and who die. However, this does also impact adults and elders and things. So it's huge, the amount of lack of dignified sanitation that is happening around the world. primarily in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, but not exclusively. One book that I don't have right here on my shelf is Waste by Catherine Coleman Flowers. And she calls waste America's dirty secret because they are dealing with this in Lowndes County, Alabama as well. Lowndes County is on the route between Selma and Montgomery of that historic voting rights march, but it has never received the benefits of civil rights to this moment. And it was the place that the Poor People's Campaign of 2018, which re-inaugurated the Poor People's Campaign of 68, it started in Lowndes County because of the connection around sanitation injustice, or what I call excretory or defecatory injustice, with poverty. This is a place where freshwater flush toilets and sewering doesn't make as much sense due to like the clay soils and the absorbencies there. However, because composting toilets overall are looked down upon, people tend to feel like they're second-class citizens if they have to use a non-sewered sanitation option, even though it might be more climate resilient than others. And so this gets into the cultural feelings about composting toilets, just like I had. Why was I already prejudiced about composting toilets and I didn't even know, right? Like, so it gets into everything from potty training on up. What we're taught to think about is dignified sanitation and is a way to handle the nutrients that come out of your body. Basically, I was taught, and my parents did love me, Edgar. I was taught a flush and forget system. Flush and forget. The first text I read called The Big Necessity by Rose George, who's a journalist. And this is one of the texts that is not super academic, but a popular audience has read. She's also done excellent work around blood and the connections of human blood, from transfusions to wars to all sorts of things. But this one is called The Big Necessity, The Unmentionable World of Human Waste and Why It Matters. And Rose George looks at that. But kind of, you know, where it ends and where I've been picking up in many ways is that the freshwater flush toilet takes a lot of water. And this is the other part of the sanitation crisis. It used to take like, I don't know, some, you know, like upwards of 8 to 10 gallons. We've got some low flushers now, 1.6 liters and such. And a number of other numbers. It kind of varies based on model, but still those are water-based systems which use water-based sewering, which for the most part combine with field runoff and industrial wastewater, all going to a wastewater treatment plant, usually if we're in the flush and forget system. And then from there, your local wastewater treatment plant does any number of things. It may separate the water and the sludge later. It may landfill and or burn that sludge. If it passes grade A biosolids by the EPA, it may be applied to foods or fields. Any number of things happen. The water is usually tested and then discharged into the like nearest water body. Basically, it's going somewhere downstream. And it's not nutrient cycling in a safe way. Used to be a lot of ocean dumping, used to be a lot of raw sewage. Clean Water Act, I want to give a shout out to the activists who helped make that possible, made a big difference, but it shored up the flush and forget system. Didn't make us ask questions about like, why are we putting our poop and pee into a water system altogether? That's okay. We can ask them now. Let's ask those questions now at this moment of climate crisis. What could happen if, just like we set out our recycling, set out our garbage, we set out, what if we set out our poop right next to that? What if it was, you know, set out some cities set out organic compost now, right? Could we imagine a system in which that This is kind of what some of hasn't really gotten to the level of many city planners yet, but we wouldn't be the first to do this. I'm looking for my copy of Paris Sewers and Sewermen. Paris had an extensive system, and a lot of other places did too, of like that way back in the day, like recapturing the nutrients, because like poop is great for topsoil. It's sticky. This is epic and like better than some chemical fertilizers because it can sequester the carbon, it can hold it, and it doesn't erode as fast, right? We need our poop for topsoil. And each time we eat, we're depleting our soil. But most species, they eat, and then what they don't use, they put right back in that watershed. We eat it, and then we put it through a whole system and potentially put it even into another watershed way downriver, right? So there's a bunch of different potentials. There's a bunch of different systems. Yes, it would take a lot of people to do this, but hey, that's green jobs. I guess technically brown jobs, but we'd have to work with all this. We need to employ people, and there's a lot of jobs that can be done. We need a lot of oversight for a different system, but all of this is possible. And we have stories, right, that are warning stories. For example, in 1968, Memphis, right, the sanitation workers, those two brothers who really sparked the sanitation workers strike, which drew Dr. King and crew to Memphis, were because they were Black men and they were not allowed to sit in the cab with their white coworkers. And so one day when it was raining, they were, the people who stand on the back of the truck, they were huddled a little bit inside to stay out of the rain. The back of that garbage truck came down and crushed them and took their lives. That is why the sanitation workers went on strike and said, no more, never again. We can't let this happen. Just because we work with garbage doesn't mean we're garbage. So that's where that phrase, I am a man, and today we say, I am a human being, comes from. They're working to be seen as humans, even as they worked with the cast off of other humans. So that is a cautionary tale about what it would take in terms of making sure that any work that someone would do with our poop and our pee, which is what we, most people generally consider unuseful or just gross, how they would be treated and worked. But regardless, there's already around the world tons and tons of sanitation workers, of excretory workers, of people who are paying attention to this because, frankly, there's a lot of money in it. And people want to live in dignified environments. So in lieu of government infrastructure that allows for flush and forget, people are finding ways to do this collection. And so in Pipe Dreams, which is the urgent global quest to transform the toilet by Chelsea Wall, she talks about some of these sanitation economies and talks about ways that people are being creative with having to deal with poop and pee. And they're actually end up quite different substances. Right. So urine, which has a lot of water in it, mostly liquid, it does have, as I said, it's sterile, has a lot of nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. Those are three major elements that are needed for agriculture. And I know people talk about peak oil sometimes, they talk about peak other things. People are talking about peak phosphorus, like in a deep way, right? And so perhaps some of you know more about kind of the history of phosphorus, and the glowing element and how the alchemists work with phosphorus way back in the day, but it is essential to life and it's a limiting factor to life. And here we are every day putting it in water. What other pathways might be possible? Dehydration is a major pathway because trying to move a lot of pee is just very, very heavy because water is very heavy to transport. And that has been a big challenge for innovators, though they're working on it. A number of schools have like started dehydration labs or figured out what would that take us at scale to dehydrate pee so that we can move it and then reapply it in various forms of agriculture. On the non-dehydration side, in Brattleboro, Vermont, they have an entire citywide urine collection system. They have urine depots, and people bring their pee from urinals in 5-gallon cubies, and they take it to the urine depot, and it's this like cool, amazing sucker machine. We live not so far from Brattleboro, so we cart our pee over there. And then they're running a big experiment at scale in urine fertilizer application for hay fields for horses. That's a really big economic factor out there. The data is showing that the pea fertilizer, urine fertilizer, does just as well as the chemical fertilizers. No worse, no better. But wow, to have a non-petroleum based fertilizer that's free at point of production and that could support local economic activity, if that isn't a climate solution, I don't know what is. But of course, it requires courage and people willing to be like, you want my what? Yes, we want your pee. I tell my students these days that they're going to be so upset. Like 50 years from now, people are going to get paid like $20 a dump. And here they are just giving it away free every day. Anyway, students are interested in getting jobs. So there's also some dystopian futures around poop farms, but we won't go there today. But yes. So yes, you can collect and add your poop to the compost, but we always just want to be aware. We're still like learning about what is in our poop and pee. And it's totally possible to work with it on your own land. Though, well, the main guy who'll help you out on that is Joe Jenkins. He wrote the Humanure Handbook, like all 4 editions. And he's working on this out in Erie, Pennsylvania. Yeah. And he has built composting toilets for a lot of places in the world and in the US, but it's illegal to try a lot of this stuff within cities. This is for reasons of public health. And also, believe it or not, y'all, there's a toilet lobby in Washington. When the first low flush mandates came in, there was like a contraband trade between like Canada and the US because people were like, you won't make me have low flush toilets. Even Trump has made some statements about low flush toilets. I mean, it's like, you know, it gets into it. People start really showing their colors. But it has to do with like what it means when like bringing the stuff of life that is gross closer to us. And that, you know, works as a metaphor as well as just like your literal shit, right? Like when you have to reckon with your output in any way, shape, or form that you may, and another reason, want to flush and forget it, right? It brings all this closer, and that really hits home for people when, you know, they're staring at their crap. But there are like lots and lots of possibilities. Yes. And in urine, the Rich Earth Institute, that is the group that I'm talking about in Brattleboro, Rich Earth Institute. They work a lot on what is the impact of pharmaceuticals, what is the impact of caffeine, what is the impact of PFAS, things of this nature. They're doing a lot of tests on that right now in terms of caffeine as a tracer. People are worried about like if they eat food fertilized by urine that has caffeine in it. They did this test with lettuce, and turns out you'd have to eat 1 head of lettuce every day for 100 years to get the same amount of caffeine as you would get from a cup of coffee. So that's the information they have on caffeine. And it just points back again to the amazing, amazing earth that we live within and its incredible abilities to deeply compost and repurpose and everything that we give it. But we want to be really conscious, of course, about what we give it. And in terms of wastewater treatment, we would be in a hugely better place, honestly, if they hadn't chosen to create combined sewers and we just had some sewers that were for household sewerage. So that would be anything that people would put down a household drain, which of course sometimes is like paint or those flushable wipes, which are not flushable, or Dawn detergent, which does not break down. Other detergents do, but Dawn does not. That's why they use them for oil spills, which are also sad, right? So if there was like not a combined sewer, we'd be like leaps and bounds ahead. And so I am really interested in studying any place that did not go the direction of combined sewer. You may be able to guess why we have a combined sewer. Industrial folks who are like, wow, we would much rather take that tax cut and ship all our waste to you all rather than internalize it and have to deal with the chemicals that we're producing. It's really the combination of what happens when poop and pee hit field runoff, and the amount of and the forever chemicals that are in industrial wastewater, and when that combines, the result at the end of the pipe and downstream is massive algal blooms, as well as all sorts of other types of toxicity. So this is like where we need to improve on that Clean Water Act and begin to ask some questions about the possibility of separating out sewers. Or since a lot of the sewers are in many ways at the end of their life, or are certainly in many cities handling more volume than was ever anticipated, we're at a really critical moment to say, how do we leapfrog and make some climate resilient sanitation systems on? And the municipal level is a great place to put pressure on this and work on this. So this will only happen though if there's enough people who come around a table and say, like, this shit makes sense. Like, let's talk about it, right? So that is my work initially right now, is just breaking the taboos. And so I just really appreciate Jim and Lily for inviting me here to talk about this as a climate issue. And I'm really interested in hearing like how you're feeling, what you're thinking, as I share this talk, and what you know about the topic, and what is possible as we continue to interact. I want to just, before we pause, I'm just checking my book stack to see if there's any others that I want to make sure to share. I think the capitalist bathroom experience, the questions of connection between capitalism and our toilets, and where sanitation and wastewater treatment plants are in cities, often part of environmental injustices in terms of their siting. So again, working towards understanding how our disposables are pushed on the people that are at times considered disposable themselves, and those impacts. And then working really hard, of course, we're like, why do we treat people like shit? And then I just came to, oh, because we treat shit like shit. So my passion for working on this point of entry or exit, whatever, is because it's just revolution from the bottom up. The reason we have the system we have is because we have all the other systems we have. It's all interconnected. And so I want to lift the lid. This is by Peter Harper and Louise Hailstrap, An Ecological Approach to Toilet Systems. And in there, they just recognize like the powerful hegemony of the flush toilet, how amazing it was in terms of separating people from pathogens, right? Like, it's an incredible system for not getting sick. And if the freshwater flush toilet is not available to all, what does that mean? What are the possibilities? Luckily, there's tons of innovation happening in places that are already water scarce, and where governments, again, at municipal and in federal levels, in a place like Kenya, are like, we have to deal with this. And the main thing that they butt up against is the colonial mentality of people wanting that porcelain god, people wanting that colonial symbol, because the freshwater flush toilet is a symbol, first of Europe, but now, frankly, it's an American standard. That's one of the toilet companies, American standard, right? So they just directly say it. And when you let someone know that the American standard is not available to them, a lot more happens in a psyche, or can happen. That brings up fear, grief, anger, revolt, right? And so these become questions that actually psychologists and marketing folks work on. So in Kenya, when Sanitation, that's one of the groups I had a chance to study alongside, a lot of their work is in the technology, but a lot of it is in marketing and advertising, to let people know that, in fact, they in Kenya can be leaders in the climate movement by making a leap past sewerage sanitation to composting mechanisms. In Kenya, I had a chance to meet with people who are working in informal or secondary cities, informal settlements, slums, what they used to be called. These are places where a lot of people have moved from the countryside. Again, because of multinational and intensity of global politics, land is being grabbed up. People are running in, but there's no place for them to poop, let alone eat, let alone live. But people are pooping, eating, and living anyway. Sanergy has figured out how to develop 4 products from poop together with other people in the container-based sanitation alliance. So one product first, the product of the job creation. They work with others to franchise a small cement little toilet block, and the franchisee is the host at that toilet block. So they collect like a nickel from everyone who wants to use it, give out toilet paper, etc., etc. Then collectors come every morning before the morning rush. So they get there like 4:35. Morning rush starts at 5:30 in Nairobi. And so they collect everything, they cart it out. Right now, they're still putting the urine in a soak pit. So they haven't yet done the dehydration stuff. But again, urine is sterile. And except for the smell, which they're still working on, they're always trying to figure out the best way to go. That is not poisoning water bodies. It's kept in a soak pit. Then they take the poop and they put it on a conveyor belt, and then it is processed by these small flies, the larvae of these flies. They're black soldier fly, and insects, grubs, dung beetles. David Waltner Toves and The Origin of Feces, what excrement can tell us about evolution, ecology, and sustainable society. He talks about the dung beetle and it's important, like how it so fits, but there's so many insects that can digest our poop, right? Because what are we if just not food for other people, right? And other people are food for us, that cycle. And so the black soldier fly larvae, they excrete this like frass, which is like kind of like high quality topsoil. And then just before they become flies, which because nobody wants more flies, they get, I'm sorry, larvae, fried. They get fried. They are very high protein at that point. And so they are fed to chickens as feed. This competes on the market against dry fish protein, and it's doing quite well. It's called Pure Protein. Talk about a rebrand. It's called Pure Protein. And so that's the second product. So the first is like kind of like the job creation and the toilet block possibilities. The second is the Pure Protein. Then that frass goes into a product called Evergrow. And farmers are reporting 15 to 30% bumps in yield by using this product on their plants. And so they like it. And what is left over after, like from that thermophilic compost gets combined with any type of wood, sawdust or chips or anything like that, and it's put through a furnace to make a briquette. And these briquettes are 1 kilogram in weight, about 4.5 inches in diameter, and they are used as a charcoal substitute. They burn denser and longer than charcoal, which is fantastic because that means that even industrial clients, like some of the big tea clients in Kenya, like these briquettes better than charcoal. This is awesome because otherwise charcoal is made by cutting down trees. And so we're simultaneously addressing deforestation. So briquettes, Pure Protein, Evergrow, Pure Protein, and like jobs and social equity and welfare. Yeah. Yes. So by the time it gets through the furnace, like, and it's kind of cool because it doesn't matter if it's 80% poop and 20% wood chips or 80% wood chips and 20% poop. There's like a big play within there. These machines are fairly simple in construction, and yeah, and so there's no pathogens. And I suppose that I'm not sure about methane, but I'm sure that sure there's a carbon cost when anything is burned. Absolutely. Would rather it not be new trees. So yeah. Yeah. And toilet paper is a big deal. Who gives a crap? Great little company with some bamboo toilet paper. They're super sweet. But yeah, so just a few other books. This is called The Little Vast Rooms of Our Undoing, right? This is the psychology of the bathroom itself. This has a lot of great material around shameful shitters and shameless shitters and kind of understanding ourselves as shitting humans. And my dear friend, Sean Schaffner, that is one book I will go get right when we break for question and answer. But he's written one called Know Your Shit, and it's really about self-knowing. I mean, you know, when you poop, like, it's the old you. I mean, it was you, and now it's not you anymore, but it is. I mean, it's you, old you know, like, so he works on that just because, in addition to breaking the taboo, just trying to get more comfort with our bodies. But yes, more on toilet paper and these questions of cutting down old growth trees to wipe our asses. It's really intense. It's really intense. Not to mention that most of the world prefers water washing, you know, and squatting rather than sitting. I could go on. But in fin, holy shit. Let's figure out how we manage human manure. And we're all in it together. So how we reuse the resource. I will pause for questions now and go get that additional book. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, thank you, thank you.